So this is the grave of
Right there.
Albert Woolson.
Yeah, the last Civil War veteran of the Union Army, and he died 109 years old in 1956. And I saw his funeral, Steve Ronstrom and I, when we were 8 years old.
Wow.
I came up and saw it, and it gave me a lifelong interest in the Civil War. His daughter also lived for a long time, and my son Joey even met her at one point, And this is all you know. There's a plaque that mentions him, but it's odd. Other Civil War veterans in Duluth are buried together in a plot in a neighboring cemetery, but this guy died later, and it's a family plot. So, yeah, we put a flag. Park Hill Cemetery, and you're not seeing a lot of graves right here because these people were poor. A lot of the graves here, most of these graves, or a fair proportion of them, were poor immigrants that died of the Spanish flu in 1918. Generally, if you see a grave and they're a young person, a teenager or a young adult, and they died in 1918, by and large, they died of two things: either World War I, or more likely, if they're a civilian, the Spanish flu, and that's who's buried here. Also, significantly, this mark over there, Clayton Jackson McGee, marks the grave of the three African-American fellas that were lynched by a white mob in Duluth after World War I in the summer of 1920. They were first buried in a pauper's field off of Rice Lake Road, and in more recent times, through the effort of the Clayton Jackson McGee organization, they were buried here. All right, these are the markers here with their names on them. This was the Duluth also has a memorial to them down where it happened on First Street. So it was the first anti-lynching memorial in the United States. So it's a significant area. So farther up there was a grave also of a Finnish fella that spoke out against World War I in a bar. He was a Finnish immigrant and a socialist, I think. And the bar people didn't like what they heard, and they grabbed him, and they lynched him also, in Lester Park in Duluth. He's buried there here. I'll try to find it. There's an inscription on it that's worth looking at. So anyway, in the First World War, at least he was enlisted in the U.S. Army, Private Arthur S. Moland, born in 1890, and he died in camp in Wadsworth, South Carolina. No doubt of the Spanish flu of 1918. The flu ripped through American Army camps with a vengeance that summer. That's the peak of the flu, which is the greatest pandemic in history until modern history anyway, until the one we just experienced. So February 1919, 32nd day. He could have died from his wounds in the war too. This guy, he was the 125th Infantry, which was in France. He died for about 3 months after the armistice in 1919. I think there was still some flu around by that time, so he's either a victim of war wounds or the flu. It doesn't tell you which one. So anyway. Olli Kukkonen's buried. Olli Kukkonen was a Finnish immigrant, and I think I mentioned he was a socialist probably, and he was in a bar in, I believe, West End of Duluth in 1918, the summer. American boys entered combat in France, and he spoke out against the war, calling it essentially a rich man's war, poor man's fight, and and there was a lot of pressure for people not to speak against the war. World War I, there was called the Sedition Act. You couldn't speak against American policy. Woodrow Wilson signed off to it, and people in the bar, the guys in the bar, resented this. And at any rate, the story was he was grabbed, hauled in the back of the car out to Lester Park and lynched from a tree out there. All right. The grave was erected years later, and it says on it, "Victim of warmongers," a pretty direct message. Victim of anti-war hysteria during the First World War. So, final resting place here. Okay. Okay. I stumbled on this. We stumbled on this one Memorial Day, and it's a family. It's elaborate, just common kind of grave of the 1890s or so, and it's a couple families. If you look at the other side here, all right. What's interesting, it's like an extended family, or what's today called a mixed family. If you come around here, there's two. Over here, Marty, I'll show you the side too. Okay. There's a thing to our brothers. Mentions one is George Schreiber, died May 20, 1858. He was 34 years old. The other is John Merrill, Company C, 176th Regiment, New York Volunteers, died March 1865. 27, gone but not forgotten. Now, the two different names. If you look down here they are. This is brother. He was drowned in 1858, age 34 years old. Okay. Here's the other guy. My brother Johnny, prisoner of war, starved at the Libby prison, March 1st, 1865. He's 27. Libby prison was a prison. It was a tobacco warehouse in the James River in Richmond for Union officers. All right, and it was fairly lethal. And they claim he died. First of all, they're different names, so I'm thinking it's kind of a blended family. What's today called, or he was adopted. I found this so interesting because it's the only grave here of someone who's actually died in the Civil War. He died about a month before Appomattox, before the war ended. But I looked it up. You can go online and look at they have information on every Union veteran online. I found the guy, to my surprise, and he wasn't an officer. He did not die at Libby Prison. He was indeed in the 176th New York Regiment. The regiment itself was organized in 1863. It was kind of what's called a scratch red, was thrown together from guys all over New York State. I think he may have been drafted, I think, I have no proof of this, but I think he may have been an immigrant. He probably had not much money, all right. He was captured at the Battle of Winchester in the Shenandoah Valley in 1864. This is all his record on the Army has a record of this. You can get it online. Winchester was a Union victory, but it was a surprise attack, and he was captured probably in his tent still that morning. All right, and it ended up being Union victory and chased the Confederates out of the Shenandoah Valley. But he was sent to a prison in North Carolina, which was similar to the more common one known as Andersonville. I can't remember the name of it offhand, but it had a high mortality rate, and he got sick. And he was at the end of the war, towards the end of the war, he was repatriated, sent to Annapolis, where the Army had a recuperation center for prisoners of war coming north. And he's probably, the railroad system in the South was shattered, so he's probably sent by rail as well as boat. And it took him a while. He was real sick by the time he got there, and he died shortly after. The Army believes, I think it was cholera actually that killed him. A lot of prisoners of war died of cholera, and starvation and deprivation. So it's a lot we don't know about this story, but it's remarkable what you did find. It also shows that sometimes family folklore itself, a message, is sometimes not exactly accurate. He definitely did not die at Libby Prison. He was, nor he was there. I don't think he was there either. But it's the only, I think, person that died in the Civil War that's buried in that, as far as I know, in Duluth ever. So anyway,
That's really interesting.
Yeah.
I would have thought there would be more.
Yeah.
What about up on the hill, though?
where?
With the memorial.
Right here?
By the cannon.
These guys all came to Duluth after. They died in, they died in their bed, or they died, they died in the 1890s.
I see, but not in
not in the war.
action.
No. Some of them survived. One of the guys there, Austin, survived the first Minnesota charge at Gettysburg. And a lot of these guys, if you look up the regiment, there were a lot of stuff. But
It makes sense because hauling a body that far in those days,
So this people had some money too, I think. If you look at the level, but it's an interesting family. I mean, as I said, it's a blended family, as we call them today.
Very interesting.
There's a lot you'd like to know more about it, But the Army has records, but they only go so far.
Sure, got it.
He did exist, and he was in the 176th New York, and he was probably drafted. So there, yeah.
And what kind of a rifle?
That's called a Parrott rifle. A Parrott gun was sort of a big gun in the Civil War. It was used for sieges, and it wouldn't be used in battle. It was pretty ponderous, so often put on a railroad, like a track, But it's a rifle barrel. If you looked inside, you'd see that there's rifling in it.
Oh,
got
so
it fired exploding shells.
Yes.
Which was kind of high tech at the time.
And further, they travel
it
further.
would go along. It was a lethal gun. It At the end of the war, there was so much surplus, though. This was bought, I think, by the Grand Army of the Republic, which is Union veterans. They bought this plot, I believe, in the 1890s. And there was so much Civil War surplus, they bought the gun probably for a song and, you know, commissioned someone to place it there. So those are graves of Union Army veterans behind them. They were from all over the United States. You had to move.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
Cool. Wow. Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So, okay. So Mama Michelina is buried in this vault.
Yeah, I think his dad is too.
I wonder if she still makes, you know, pizzas and pasta. You know? Of course, the story of Gino is that you were saying that he came back from Second World War.
And he started raising bean sprouts up on the Iron Range. And I think eventually started selling boxed, you know, quote, Chinese, unquote, food. You know, Chongqing chow mein was his signature thing. And he branched off into, you know, pizza and other things. And late in life started Michelina's, which is, you know, still popular this day, frozen food. And it's named after his mother, you know. Grandma's restaurant is named after his grandmother, I believe. So anyway, that's what I...
To die, to be really dead, that must be glorious.